Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of Lowdown. Today I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by David Garcia, coach, educator, and founder of It's Just a Sport. David, a big warm welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me. I enjoy listening to the podcast, so definitely a pleasure for me to be on.
Yeah, look, we've both been looking forward to this for a long time, but as a long time listener as yourself, David, you know where we begin this show, and we always begin by asking, could you please take us through your earliest football memory?
Yeah, I actually prepared for it because I knew it was coming. But yeah, definitely, I have a very vivid memory of the 1998 France World Cup. So I was born in Mexico, and I'm at an early age we moved to the United States. However, I've always followed Mexico. So I remember very vividly that World Cup and being very excited to watch Mexico. I was probably like 7 or 8 years old. And I vividly remember I had that same jersey. They had a very unique shirt that year, and it had like some Aztec like symbolism. And yeah, I remember that World Cup very vividly. I remember the players. And that's probably the first memory that I have of like watching the game. Yeah, I remember growing up playing like with my dad and with my uncle and grandfather, like in the park, and we kick the ball around. But as a memory of some sort of organized football, it's definitely that first 98 World Cup.
And I mean, 98 World Cup is think it's a sign of the times too. It's been quite a prominent feature when I speak about that earliest football memories. And I mean, that's a World Cup that became renowned for Zinedine Zidane, it became renowned for Ronaldo. So I suppose, I mean, obviously now speaking about your own coaching capacity, did that World Cup impact or shape any way in which you positively watch or view the game of football?
I don't think so. I think it was more of a like watching it as a fan, watching it as a somebody getting like engrossed engrossed with the drama of it, like being emotionally invested into the result. Um, like I do remember like the like you said, Zidane specifically, and I remember like the way he moved, and so maybe I don't think I could answer that for sure, but yeah, possibly.
Interesting one. And I mean, growing up with that at the forefront of your brain, I mean, where did the coaching bug begin to come into play for you, David?
Um, so I so I played in the United States. I grew up playing in the United States. Did the well back in back when I was growing up, there was like Premier Soccer and ODP stuff, and so I did the traditional path through youth soccer in the United States, and then I went off to college, played in college, and it was after that probably my last year in college, where I was in summers. I do summer camps, and yeah, it started to be more interested in coaching. Maybe not entirely. Like I didn't think that I would continue with it. I just thought it was something fun to do, and then it was when I uh left college, left university. I graduated, I finished, and I got an assistant job as a graduate assistant coaching at a nearby college. That was probably the time where I thought, okay, I really enjoy this. Like I do want to stay connected to the game. Um, and it wasn't until I actually finished those 2 years and I met some Spanish guys, and this is a little bit further down my coaching journey. Spanish guys that would come to, I had met them. They would come to my house. They would do summer camps, and they would stay the summer, and I would work the summer camps with them, and then they would go back to Spain, after the summer ended. And they invited me after one of those summers. They said, why don't you come to Spain and you could do your UEFA licensing? We're the instructors there. We could get you on the courses. And so I did. And I remember very vividly having traveled to Spain and sitting with the director of the Andalusian Federation and my friend, one of the instructors. And he asked me that same question, like, it sounds like you have the bug now. And like, I had never heard it. And it's like, it sticks with me still, because I think that's the moment where I realized, wow, like I came all this way. This must mean that I'm really passionate about it. Like that I'm following this thing to, I didn't even know where it was going to lead to. But him asking me that question, and when we were drinking that coffee, is when I realized, yeah, this is this is more than just like a hobby at this point.
Oh, and I mean, as we spoke off air, I've been following your good work with It's Just a Sport for a while. I mean, you've been doing it for countless years, but there was an old tweet that you brought up a few weeks ago, and for me, it's very much interesting to see how the mission statement for It's Just a Sport, you mentioned two key words there about community and curiosity, how
Mm-hmm.
that kind of reigns supreme throughout your own coaching journey. So the
Mm-hmm.
creation of It's Just a Sport, with community and curiosity at the bedrock. Why?
Well, so for a long time, It's Just a Sport was just an outlet for my thoughts. So I didn't really have a mission for it. I didn't have a purpose for it. It was just, through living experiences, one of the best ways that I can find insight in things is to reflect on them and to write on them. And I find that's one of the best ways for me to grow is for me to put things out into the public sphere and essentially have to reflect on my experiences. However, in the last couple of years, I wanted to grow further. I felt like that wasn't enough at that point. Like I wanted to push the It's Just a Sport further. So at that point, yeah, I sat down and I thought, well, what do I want it to be? Like what would I have wanted when I was growing and learning through my coaching journey and starting. And one of the things that I find probably the most important thing to growth is curiosity. Is I always ask why, like to the point where my wife sometimes gets annoyed at me, where because I'm asking like why, because I have two small kids, so I'll be asking like, I wonder why he's behaving that way, or I wonder, and sometimes she'll be like, sometimes there is no why, sometimes it's just the way that it is. But for me, that never satisfies me. I always want to know why. And this translates into coaching is that I always want to figure out what's the underlying reason for something, and that kind of is the bedrock of It's Just a Sport, and always has been. I just never realized it. So I wanted that to continue, and I wanted to spark that same curiosity or like desire to want to know why to other coaches. And the other part is that I've always felt that in interactions like the one we're having now, that's where you can learn the most from. I think it's one thing to reflect on your own and write things, but it's another thing when it's real time. I say something and you react to it in real time, which then has, creates some sort of feedback loop into me, like, oh, I wonder how he's interpreting what I said, and how, what I said, does that make sense, or did I explain that clearly enough, or oh yeah, that's a good point, what he just responded. So through that interaction, that can only happen through like I say, interactions. And for me, that's vital to the community, and that's vital to creating community is people that can be in a space, but digital space, or see each other frequently enough where we can have those interactions. So one of the things that I love doing is a monthly webinar where I can actually see people, yes, through a screen, and it's not ideal, but there is still some interaction where there's real-time feedback about the things that we're thinking. And for me, the only way that can occur is through building a community, and to do that, like I say, it needs to be like a repetitive, almost something, a time or something that everybody looks forward to and wants to meet. It's not easy to do because everybody's on a different schedule, but I think when we can commit to that, there's a lot of growth that can come from that.
Really well said. And it's interesting too, because, speaking of creativity, at the heart of creativity, of course, is self-expression. And I'm just writing down here, there's many different ways in which the game of football can be expressed. However, for you, David, would you say there's a part of football or there's a style of football that best resonates with you and your soul?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and it's so like I said, I got I did most of my coaching journey, at least thus far, in Spain, and working alongside Spanish coaches and doing UEFA licensing in Spain. So I got a lot of experiences then, and one of the biggest styles or lenses to look at football in Spain is obviously positional play. It's juego de posición. And I found it when I was experiencing, and I saw kids experiencing it, and in how the perspective that they provided in Spain in terms of that juego de posición allowed kids to understand, and I saw the development in their cognitive understanding of the game, of primarily, if I could boil it down, is how can I use my position to directly affect and manipulate, affect either direct opponents or indirect opponents. So like when they're really little, when they're really young, they're just the primary thing is how can we have young players understand that they can affect their direct opponent via their positioning. So by standing 2 yards to the left, 2 yards to the right, a little bit closer, a little bit further away, all of those things can have a direct effect on their opponent. And when they start to see almost like the cause and effect of that as they grow through the game, they can then start to add layers to that, where they can start to then interact with their teammates. And when we do something together via our positioning, it has a direct effect on the game. And I saw that to be such a good developmental tool, because it was almost like science experiments for the kids, where they could see the cause and effect of where they were positioned. So relative to other factors of the other variables of the game. And I guess maybe that's why I still, I strongly still follow that perspective of juego de posición, positional play, because I do feel that it simplifies the game when done appropriately, age appropriately, simplifies the game for kids so that they can see, like I said, those effects on the game, so they can see that they can stay connected with the game at all times. So in short, yes, I definitely follow a style. It's something that holds true to me is positional play or juego de posición.
And I know what's very important to you too is the ability to translate this into methodology and capture it as part of a game model, David. I mean, which you obviously do a pretty good job of educating coaches on your platform regarding the significance of understanding the importance of creating that game model.
Yeah, I think the game model is important. I think sometimes the word game model can be misconstrued. I don't know how other people define it, because obviously everybody has their own experience with it and their own way that they interpret when somebody says game model. However, the way that I interpret it is a collection of intentions, of how can we direct attention, or what do we deem the most important part of the game, and how can we direct attention to those really important variables, for lack of a better word. And once we have kind of clarified what those variables are, what is the most important part that we want to direct attention to and have players pay attention to, in that there will be some sort of aligning of intentions, aligning of attention. So where everybody ideally is paying attention to the same things. And when that occurs, you can see that when you hear phrases like, it looks like they're clicking, or like they're on the same page, all those phrases that kind of try to describe when players have an understanding of each other and understanding of what the team is trying to do. That's what the result of paying attention to the same things and aligning intentions to the same things is playing on the same page, or the team that is clicking. So I think that for me, it's, and not only for the value for the players, but for the value for the coach, to be able to, they could pay attention to 1,000 different things, but that only makes it confusing for players, because then basically everything that comes into their attention, to their consciousness, they're going to say, as opposed to saying, ignoring the things that aren't helpful at the moment, because the game model kind of almost, that's like blinders for the coach, and allows them to focus on what we've already established to be important. So I think for the value for that the game model provides for the coach is that it allows them to harness their attention, to be able to simplify the game to a few things that we can constantly and consistently direct attention to.
And what are some considerations coaches should take into play, David, with respect to updating and refining that game model and adding different variables and adaptations into it?
So some of the things that so I run a game model development workshop is for people who, I think one of the first things the first roadblocks that I see is that I don't know, the coaches tell me I don't know where to start, right? So the first step is trying to define what is this ideal, or what, like you just asked me, like, what is the football that you connect to the most? And the way that I do this initially is I ask them, describe to me what is the perfect type of football. What is the ideal football for you? And I asked them, like, as a player, like, what's the one that you had the most fun with, had the most exciting experiences with? What's the one that, or maybe you didn't experience it firsthand, but you saw it and you can connect to it, and it, because by finding that first initial thing that you connect to the most, that's the one that you'll be most passionate about. That's the one that you'll be able to communicate with passion, because that's what a good coach does, is that they need to be able to believe in the thing that they're trying to communicate. Now, once that's done, the next part is, as we discussed in the previous webinar that I did on culture, is the player's abilities or inabilities. And I think this is sometimes where we kind of lose track of what the purpose of a game model is. Purpose of a game model is to help the players, right? And if we have an understanding and recognition, we respect what the players are capable of doing, or maybe incapable of doing, their abilities and their inabilities, and on top of that, experiences and inexperiences. If we respect those, then how can we tailor that ideal football that this coach describes to me to the people that are going to have to bring it to life? If if it's too far of what they're able to do, when I refer to like that ideal football, but then you see them play, you're like, well, maybe at the moment this is not something that they can connect to. Well, then how can we bridge the gap? And that's the key, is we want to bridge the gap to the thing that they're capable of, and that we want to that you as the coach, the coach is able to communicate passionately. So that would be the next step. And then from there, it's just looking to kind of like to set objectives, intentions within different phases of the game, however you describe phases. And this is something else that we go into, pretty extensively, is that the more you divide the game into phases, into whatever it is you want to divide the game into, the more complicated, the more difficult it's going to be to bring to life, right? You want to find a balance where as many phases or moments of the game as necessary, and then we find objectives within that. Then we can define how can an individual contribute to that. That's another part that a game model often lacks, is that, well, there's individuals playing the game, and we have to tailor the language and help the players within their roles, whatever their roles are. And again, this is something that needs to be defined by the coach. Whatever the roles are, how are they contributing to it? Because that's key. Is that the team is made up of individuals. It's this paradox of like individuals and team, individual team. But we need to provide something for them. So in a nutshell, that's more or less the process that one goes through, that I help, or at least I try to help coaches go through.
In other words, what you're basically describing there is you're bringing to life the coach's understanding of their own coaching workflow.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's interesting, right, too, because what I'm fascinated and what I'm trying to research myself at the moment too is like when we look at individuals within the team, individuals within the game model context, better understanding of them, better training standards as well. And then if you look at the future Gen Z player, what they want is they want to have everything now, but they also want to be part of everything. They want to be, flexibility and adaptability are two words that keep coming back that are real prominent. So is there anything that you're studying at the moment, or is there anything with your own lens, obviously coaching for 12 plus years, David, where you've seen a shift in basically what coaches need to be understanding and giving back to players in terms of the game model?
I think one of the things that I think as coaches, we want to try to fix what they don't do well. But the inverse of that is provide them opportunities to excel in the thing that they already do well. So essentially amplify their natural tendencies, amplify the thing that they are naturally can really excel at, and put them in situations where that will continue to develop further. I think that's one of the things that as coaching as coaches we can start to do better. And in the process to do that is, first you need to observe. We need to take in, have an input of what the player is capable of, because those natural tendencies that they have, those are the things that are unique to them. And if we can amplify that uniqueness, that unique expression of their game, and obviously then it's like we said, it's in 11 individuals trying to work together. So then how do those fit together? That's kind of the difficult part. But I've found that more often than not, that works itself naturally. That works out naturally, in that that's what complex systems do, is that like individual parts find a way, when there's a kind of a collective intention, a collective objective. They find a way to express themselves individually while also working with each other to achieve that team objective. So I would say that we want to also amplify the players' unique expressions of the game, and instead of like I said before, instead of correcting all the weaknesses, and essentially by correcting all the weaknesses, you're making every player look the same, and there's no uniqueness. And I think that's one of the ways that we can make sure that the environment is personalized.
I think that word there at the end, personalized, best sums it up, because what we're speaking of here in terms of creating your own methodology and having the tools to adapt and refine your own game model, it's something that happens from the bottom up, and it's emergent, I suppose, from the top down. Because if you were to follow certain circles, you would hasten a guess to say that we're in a crisis of understanding at the moment when it comes to certain realms of the footballing experience. Juan Malilo famously speaking of the Garnish eating the steak with reference to the state of the game in 2022 on The Athletic. But I mean, how important is this authentic expression of football in light of, David, what one could say as the growing homogenization of the game?
I think it's really important, because at the end of the day, if we talk about what football is, it's a game. It's a game that people play. And when you study and you read what philosophers over the centuries have talked about what play is basically a at the end of the day, within what the importance of games within human endeavors, it's insignificant. Like, there's no purpose to them. Like, once the game ends, that's it. Like, it ends, and then people go back to their lives, and they go back to the job. However, within that play, people, young and old, are able to essentially be someone else, or be not someone else, be a different version of themselves in their pursuit of whatever it is that they're trying to play. So, as I said, philosophers have studied what play is, and they realize that it's people trying to expand their abilities to do something, but most of the time it's their abilities. Like, if you really think about a kid learning how to score a goal, that skill, that's not going to be useful anywhere else besides that specific game. So if you think of it, the value of learning that specific skill, it's not that valuable towards their life. However, in the process of learning whatever skill that it is that they need to master in that game, they learn other skills. They learn to be resilient. They learn to struggle through adversity. They learn, and I think that's what games do, and that's what football does. And sometimes we forget. We want to give, like, football this long-term purpose is to develop professionals, and we forget that the purpose is just for them to experience what it feels like to learn something, to master something, to work together, all of these skills that you need as a person: how to collaborate, how to communicate with others, how to know how to lose, how to know how to win, how to show up day in and day out, even when maybe there's days you don't want to go to training, but you know that it's in your pursuit of this thing that you're trying to master. And in that, I think that the purpose, what Leo, I think, understands is that it's a game, and people need to express themselves in that game as a unique self, and their experience in that game needs to be respected. And it's when we try to to mold players into a certain way so that they can become professional players, it's where we lose the magic of play. So I think Lidio kind of understands that, and it's fortunate and unfortunate that he's a professional coach who works with at the professional level, which is probably the same thing that he's trying to he kind of like pushes back on, but the fortunate part is that he's given a voice because he works at the professional level. So a little my rant about games and how we kind of lose track of, but I think that is important, is that we need to remember that it is a game where people need to experience themselves in play.
I think that's absolutely fascinating and equally enlightening, just speaking about there, the concept of play and bringing it all back. Because for me, what you're suggesting there to me, Dave, is that it's nearly like the player or the coach or the player, let's speak of now, that takes to the field, the game itself enables a collision of multiple identities, to meet each other between those white lines. So, are we rather better off speaking about character development rather than the athletic development piece?
I think character development is a byproduct of the what the player is trying to achieve within the game. So within football, like I've said, is they're trying to master certain things, and they're going to have experiences that are going to test their and push their character, for lack of a better word. And it's in those moments where, yes, the coach should be a guide, having more life experience than perhaps a young player, to guide them through what it means to be for example, good teammate. What does it mean to be a good teammate? What does it mean to be a good competitor? What does it mean to be respectful of the opponent, respectful of the game? What does it mean to struggle through adversity and perhaps be guided with some tools to know that when I feel disappointment, when I feel frustrated, when I feel negative about my performance, that in and of itself isn't a bad thing, but with the guidance of the coach, with the guidance of the person alongside them, and with the guidance of their parents, this is the other part, how can they turn that frustration, disappointment into how to deal with adversity? Because that ultimately, that's at the end of the day, I don't want to get too philosophical, because that's what life is problem after problem after problem. And if as a young person you learn, when I'm faced with problems, it's okay, I just need to work with who I need to work with, or I need to figure out how I can solve this problem. And that's how I think that's why I think character development is a byproduct of that, what's going on in the game. And by placing them in experiences of the game, they're going to be faced with situations where their character will have to develop, and they'll have the tools to then, like I said, solve problems in the future, or learn how to communicate with teammates or coworkers in the future.
Well,
Family members.
It's nearly better as if to describe the coach really as an experience architect rather than Dave.
Yeah, and I laugh because that's in the mission statement of It's Just a Sport. One of the things I didn't put publicly into a tweet or anything, but one of my missions is to create experiences, and we create experiences through the game. And for me personally in coach development, I want to create experiences for coaches that they can then reflect on, and they can also learn. Because if you think about what a coach does, more often than not, they spend a lot of their time in something that's not going to, at the end of the day, it's going to be meaningless. But and I don't want to sound too, dark and gloomy around that, but we select to use our time in this like silly endeavor of football because we enjoy it, because we know the experiences we'll get from that will help us grow as people. And I don't know if we know that kind of consciously, or we choose that consciously. But in the same way that I see the value of crafting, like you said, experiences for players so that they can learn how to, like, I don't want to belabor the point, but how to face adversity, for example. I also want to craft experiences for coaches so that they know how they can lead better, how they can work with young people better, how they can be more empathetic, how they can be more passionate, how they can be more um more organized in their thoughts, or reflective. All those things will serve human beings in general. And yes, I think the only starting point is experiencing something, and experiencing something you're passionate about is an even greater learning tool.
It's something which I'm noticing a lot more, and it's the growing importance too of that coach athlete relationship. Not in terms of an increase in the contact time between coach and athlete, but with due respect to looking at the ratio of the coach athlete relationship time compared to the friend athlete relationship time, compared to the parent athlete relationship time. I think if you look at the modern education system now, there's an awful lot of onus and responsibility that parents put on coaches' shoulders. There's an awful lot that comes into play when we look at this game of football as one big life experience, and then within it, we're just a microcosm and a figment of it. So everything is meaningful, but in the same breath, it could all go back to dust and zero and be meaningless. So for me, it's just interesting because when we speak about going forward and we speak about how the game on the field is about to evolve, for me, I think, unbeknownst to most of ourselves, I think we're in an age now where this coach athlete relationship is rapidly transforming into something which is like it's going to weigh an awful lot more on coaches' shoulders over the coming years. And I think, and I would have to say, I hope that we are well tooled and well equipped to deal with it too.
Yeah, I think that one of the most evident things is that in order to help others, in order to lead others, to serve others, you first have to take care of yourself. And I know we spoke about this in before we started recording, was that often we coaches work 2 weeks straight without a day off, right? And then we'll have one day off, and then we're back at it for another 2 weeks, and that can take a physical toll, a mental toll. And when you're not able to take care of yourself, and it's going to be very hard to take care of others and to lead others. So yes, having also the emotional regulation required to be in, because those experiences, think about a game experience, a match experience, a very emotional experience. And often where, we always, like, as a collective, we talk about this coach who like blows up on players. And I don't know who these coaches are. That I've seen absolutely coaches have tough days and they yell at a referee. But I see that as a result of a lack of emotional regulation. And how can we learn to understand as a coach, learn to understand how we can regulate ourselves, how we can take some perspective, and zoom out and say, this is a 7-year-old's game. We, then this is a 13-year-old coaching, and take that perspective in that little second. And I'll make a connection to I read this, I don't remember where, to be honest, but often you see the worst in people when they're faced with some form of inconvenience. So like your flight gets delayed and they blow up on the person who's trying to book them the next flight or trying to book them a hotel. And it's in those moments where we can stop to take perspective, to zoom out and say, the person in front of me has no, it's not their fault. And to say, I need to be still and empathetic, and I need to be a compassionate person with this person, even though what I'm experiencing is far from ideal. And it's the same thing when we fault coaches for certain things. I don't think anybody's in this for any other reasons that they want to help, or they want to have an experience. Like I said, they want to have an experience within the game, and in through those experiences, they're going to learn something about themselves. But to back to your point, yes, we have to take care of ourselves. We have to know what we need in order to better serve others. What tools do we need to develop to help be the best version of ourselves for others?
It's interesting. I mean, you run a series of fantastic webinars, which I would implore a lot of people to check out, Dave, if not everyone. About creation of your game model. You ran a recent one on culture. I mean, is Coach Wellbeing on the cards for any time soon?
Yeah, I mean, it should be. Here's the thing that I'm hoping, yeah, our conversation will at least will pique the interest of at least one coach. But what I find is that that's not a topic that is that the coaches are interested in, because it's not as appealing as a tactical one, right? Like I'm very aware that when I post something to social media and to Twitter, that the engagement will be much higher when it's involves a tactical topic, as opposed to emotional regulation. Yet I see emotional regulation, or like I said, emotion or coach well-being as the groundwork to it all. So yeah, maybe, yeah, I think it would be an interesting. I would love to do that.
I mean, and as a key protagonist in terms of understanding what happens on and off the pitch as a coach, David, I mean, as someone as curious as yourself and you have a huge community behind you, I mean, where do you see the game evolving, and how do you see yourself and It's Just for a Sport being positioned alongside it?
It's a good question. I don't know where the game will evolve to. I have like theories or what I would like to see. But what I can say is that the my intentions with everything that I do is for coaches to see their craft as creating experiences, and players experiencing the game, using the game as a tool to become better people. And if through that a handful of players really excel and they reach their professional level, great. But ultimately, I would like for each player and each coach to provide to have an experience where they can try to attain the best version of themselves within the game, And I think the only way to do that, and this is now where I hope or maybe I think it might go, is that we're having understanding about meeting people where they're at, and instead of trying to mold people to where we think they should be, is meeting people where they're at and saying, and essentially asking, how can I help you? How can I help you? What do you want to achieve? And how can I help you get there? So, a lot of the discussions around the culture piece, I think, are really important. What Leo brought to life in his article, and people like Jamie Hamilton, who's done a good job of shedding light on that as well, is important, because we're moving towards, I would like for us to move towards a place where when you meet people where they're at, naturally you're going to respect their culture, and you respect their experiences and their inexperiences, and what they see, and how they've experienced football to that point. So that's my hope, is that we'll start to get different styles and different and I think we are, to be completely honest. I think there's a lot of unique expressions of football at the highest level. You watch like Xabi Alonso's Leverkusen, and it's a really cool style of football. Same with obviously Fluminense and Malmo, but even like when you watch Manchester City, they evolve over time, and that's a cool thing to watch too. It's unique expression based on the people that are bringing it to life. So I think even with what we would call the traditional, and I use that in quotations, traditional modern football, there's deviations and there's unique expressions of it. So if we can recognize that and then bring to life in our context how we can bring a unique expression of football to life.
And is there anything happening now in player performance pathways underneath the surface that you think or believe will perhaps become more commonplace and a lot of people will be speaking about over the coming decade or so?
Could you elaborate on that question?
Yeah, sure. I think it's really interesting. Like, we all understand that we're at this token edge of, or this totem edge, I would say, of creativity and innovation at the moment, where the game's in a delicate balance. And again, you can look at it and people misrepresented it too by just deciphering it down into relationism versus positionism, so on and so forth. Well, for me, there's an awful lot of good work being done behind the scenes at clubs, big, small, or wherever, all over the world, that is perhaps cutting edge and really innovative and really new at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything that you're aware of or anything that you're observing from afar right now that you think, wow, I think this really has the potential to blow up and become quite commonplace over the coming decade or so?
In short, I don't know. I Yeah, obviously there's a lot of interesting technology around. For example, I've seen a lot of like gadgets or virtual reality around like scanning, like helping players to scan and having awareness around that. Um, what and this maybe this goes right back to where we started about Leo saying the garnish, eats the steak, is that at the end of the day, like I've discussed, the game is the experience, the central experience that needs to occur. And if we can use technology to enhance that experience, great. If we're using technology to detract from that experience, then it's, in my opinion, that's not a good use of technology. So maybe it's and I'm just thinking, trying to think of different things that I've seen. Like I've seen some use of like player well-being. And for example, at my club, we do even at a young age, we start to have mental performance coaches or sports psychologists intervene or be a part of the community of that team in the group, but we use them, and they're used in a way that amplifies the current experience as opposed to being separate from it. So yeah, to answer your question, I think I'm not sure what we can continue to do, but what I can say is that if we can use additional technologies, advancements in knowledge to really enhance that game experience and what the game already is, that's fantastic. When it starts to take players away from that, or it starts to, divide or essentially break up that game experience and what it already is, then I don't know if it's as useful as we think it is.
Absolutely fascinating. I'd have to say, as we come to a close in this conversation, David, I mean, the discourse between us both it's taken me to a place I didn't think we'd, visit in this episode alone, in terms of all four all four corners of the game, all four corners of the world. Um, Really fascinating for me to understand how the coach athlete relationship will evolve, and how, in a way, like the tactical blueprint of the game on field is actually metaphysical in a way, in terms of what it gives rise to in terms of character development, not only the athlete, the coach, and the support system around it. So I think there's plenty of range here for a round two, I would assume. But as as is closing tradition on this podcast, I end by asking, what would be the one bit of key advice you'd have for anyone wishing to thread a similar path to yourself?
I would say reflection. I think making purposeful time to reflect on experiences, because like I said, I think a coach is can be bombarded, and their time can be stolen by what is deemed that like needs to happen, what is necessary, and they go from training session back to back to back for multiple days in the row. Then they have a match, then they have another match, then they directly go back into training, and then there's travel, and then there's watch the film, and all of those things. Basically, it's in terms of insight. We also need some form of output, in that's what the reflection process is. Like, you're consuming all these experiences, but if there's no stop, if you don't make time to digest those experiences, because we all have them, we all have reflections. However, I think most people don't externalize them, and then they just get lost. They just get forgotten in the abyss of our brain, in our mind, and we don't remember, the thing that we learned. So when we can start to externalize that reflection process, we're digesting those experiences, and through that process, you gain insight that you can remember. You gain insight that you can go back to. For example, I have a bunch of notebooks that I have had since I started, and sometimes I'll go back and I'll read them, and I'll be like, oh, I wonder what I wrote down 6 years ago after a training session. And it's sometimes very interesting, and all those things, I think they build upon each other, and that knowledge builds upon each other, and those insights build upon each other. But if you don't make time for that process, no one's going to just say, okay, well, here's your reflection time. No one ever has said that. Like, you have to take it for yourself. You have to make it for yourself. So even though it's not easy, I do think if coaches want to continue to grow, and by no means am I a finished product. Like, I still want to continue to grow, but I think that process is important. And I think coaches should make time for it.
Really fantastic. David Garcia, it's been an absolute pleasure to host you today on the show.
Great. Thank you so much, Connor.